So today we're taking you to a real mushroom inoculation class, and by the end of this video you will know exactly step by step what to do.
On the farm that mostly we're just doing for ourselves, but the last couple of years we have been doing workshops on them. So I know some of you have made wreaths with me, like fresh greenery wreaths, and I was here in December. I've done them other places, and I was joking today that when I was bringing all these in here that I guess I just go around places bringing tree limbs and soft buildings. But one of the things that we've done is been doing mushroom logs. And we have sold some mushrooms a little bit in the past, but it hasn't been a big thing that we're really trying to do and sell for money. One of the reasons is growing mushrooms on logs specifically is like pretty hard to have mushrooms when you want them. You're a little bit more on when nature gives you mushrooms on logs, you can have them, versus being like, I can grow mushrooms and have them every week for someone. It's pretty hard to do. There are a bunch of different ways you can grow mushrooms. You know, a lot of people that are commercial are growing them in like mushroom bags and like a mushroom room they built, or people will grow them on like straw that they sanitize and buckets. And then you can kind of do it when you want and control when you have mushrooms. But these you're going to take home and you're just going to get mushrooms when they want to give you mushrooms. So, has anybody grown mushrooms on logs in here before? Awesome. All right. Only 2 people have to listen to my spiel with all the knowledge. Okay. One of the reasons that we like doing them on logs versus saying we're really going to like do mushroom production to sell as a part of our farm is that we find ourselves cutting trees down for various purposes a lot of the time. And so this can kind of fit in with our forest management goals of what we want to do on the property. And so it's like a 2 for thing. We can get some food out of this, and also we're going to cut these trees down anyway, depending on, you know, if you're trying to do a timber stand improvement and you're cutting down smaller trees that are getting shaded out, or all these box elders came off of our farm where there was like an old fence row a long time ago before we had properties, and we don't have a fence there, but there's just like a line of box elder trees and that we didn't really want there. So we were going to cut them down eventually, and this was a good reason for us to actually go cut them down. So, you know, I think it's like a great way if you're already gonna be doing some tree cutting, but all the limb wood, maybe you're not going to cut up as firewood, then you could grow some mushrooms on it. We also heat our house with firewood. We sell some firewood at the campground. So we're doing lots of wood cutting, and this is like a great way to use some of the limbs. So the 2 most important parts of growing mushrooms on logs is when you cut the trees down, number 1, and 2, matching the type of mushroom you want to grow to the type of wood that you cut. So the first thing of when the timing when you can cut it is you really can only cut your trees down when they're dormant. So if you're like really excited after today and you want to go home and do like 100 mushroom logs, you can't do it. But you can plan ahead and do it next winter. We cut these logs in the middle of February, so they've been cut like about 6 weeks. So you can cut logs in the winter if you're doing work on cutting things down and then hold them over. But we're getting to the end of the holding over period. Like these are very dry. Also, it hasn't rained. It's rained on them and I haven't been watering them. So when you go home, after you do these, please take a water hose or something and really soak these logs, because it might rain later this week and get them, but I would say just to be safe, go water these after we put mushrooms in them to like make sure that the mushroom spawn doesn't dry out. But you can start cutting in the fall after the trees have left their leaves. And some people will even inoculate, I've done it before, inoculate your log like in November. But really for the best chance of having great mushrooms is you want to inoculate them when there's I think, I could be wrong in these exact numbers, so don't hold me to this, I'm blanking a little bit on them, but like 30 days above 45 degrees after you put the mushroom spawn in your logs. So if we're doing that in November, we don't always have that weather. So I have done it before. I've taught workshops where we did it in November because that was like the convenient time of year to do it. So I'm not saying not to do that, but if you're like, I'm going to do it by the book, I would inoculate your logs like in February or March. And you could cut the trees down in January and hold them over till you want to do it, but then when it starts to kind of warm up. We did a bunch of mushroom logs for ourselves this year in February. But if you are going to hold, say you're going to do some tree cutting down in February, but you don't think you're going to inoculate them till right now, these trees we cut down 6 weeks ago because we knew we were doing these workshops and we had to cut the trees down before bud break. And we're like, it's kind of warming up. We think they're going to break. We need to cut these trees right now. You can take a seat anywhere. Hello. Good to see you.
Next time you bring this down on the board and say, oh, you're in the wrong spot.
Oh. Happens. It's confusing with two buildings.
Yes.
So we cut these down in February and we just left the whole tree laying on the ground so that the limbs were still on it and it was kind of keeping the tree up off of the ground a little bit and keeping some of the moisture in the tree. And then we just, this week, went and cut them in these lengths. Because kind of you're holding them over, you don't want any wild mushrooms to colonize this. And you don't want them to completely dry out. So these are drier. You should go water them when you get home. But if you're going to cut your trees way ahead, I want to cut them up into their little pieces until you're getting closer to inoculating them. And then not to drill your holes in them. As you can see, I pre-drilled all these until you're getting ready to do it. We don't want to compete with any wild mushrooms because we're controlling what's going on this. And also if you're storing them, if you keep them with the branches on so they're a little bit off the ground, or like after you cut them, we have them on a pallet, just so, you know, we are emulating nature. Mushrooms are going to decompose these logs, but we aren't trying to put them right on the ground and say, start decomposing this right now. So the number one thing is when you want to cut your logs. I do think there are some mushrooms you can grow, because there's a lot of different types, that you can cut in the trees in the summer. So not dormant, but like the worst time to cut is really like in this time of year, in the spring, or in the early fall, when like the sap is kind of changing in the tree. I think you can do it in the summer. I wouldn't recommend it. If you're going to spend the money to buy the spawn and the time to do it, I wouldn't do it in the summer. Summer's also just my really busy time of year, so I'm never going to do it in the summer. But I think if you would do research, there's probably some things that have some types of mushrooms will tell you you can do it in the summer. So it tells you a chart on your catalog you have on page 5 that has kind of like the time of the year on here for reference, and you could also look that up more specifically, but I think you're good. Best bet is to cut in the winter. Then right next to that, there's a chart. And really why I gave you this catalog, it looks like I'm just like very promotional for field and forest products, is because it has this whole chart in here that matches up what mushroom variety with which species of tree go together. So that's really the second most important part. If you know you're going to be doing some work in your forest, or you're going to clean out a fence row and you know it's going to be a certain type of tree, then you might look on here and say, what can grow on box elder? And then you say, oh, oysters do really great on that. Or if you really want to grow a certain type of mushroom, say you really want to grow shiitake mushrooms, which is what I think you mostly hear about. I mean, you can grow a million things on them. So you mostly hear about like shiitakes, or in Japan, like really big shiitake production on their oaks. So if you're really interested in doing shiitakes, then you would want to go cut the tree specifically for it. But you just need to do a match one way or the other, however you want to do it. And it tells you what's like superior, what's recommended, what's compatible, and like what ones you really don't want to do. So tonight I brought all oyster mushroom spawn, and everyone has a box elder branch, I believe. Because I wanted to cut these box elder trees down, but also a reason I think my husband Will, when he's cutting them, was a little bit like, we don't have any more box elders, you can't be doing this anymore. But I wanted people to have oysters too, because the oysters will fruit more quickly than shiitakes. And those are like the two like most commonly ones grown on wood. And I didn't want you all to have to wait for like years to see your mushrooms. In the past, when I have inoculated oyster in March, I got my first flush of oyster mushrooms in September. But that was with a slightly different type of spawn I'll talk about in a second. So these mushrooms, when you take them home, I would start looking in September after a big rain and go look and see if you start getting any mushrooms. My guess is it will take longer than that with this plug spawn that we're using. So I think your best chance of your first mushroom will be like in November after a big rain. But if you don't see any in November, don't like throw them in the creek and give up, I would say next March you might get some. But so anywhere between next September, this coming September to next March, you should probably get your first flush of mushrooms off of these. When I have grown shiitake mushroom with plug spawn, the earliest I ever saw a mushroom was 18 months. So that's reason I wanted you to have oysters, because you might start getting them in like 6 or 9 months, and that's just not as long to wait. And I think in terms of if you haven't been eating a lot of different types of mushrooms, I think the oysters are more mild and flavored than the shiitake, and that you could use them just about any recipe you would cook mushrooms in. So that's kind of the 3 reasons that I chose oyster mushrooms for you. We have our logs, and then we're going to put mushroom spawn in them. And then you see you have I pre-drilled all of your holes in your logs because it takes a while, and I didn't want you to be there for like 10 years. In a past life, I had a different job, and I taught mushroom workshops, and my memories is like being in the black of night, and everyone's out there with the drill still trying to get that. I was like, we're not going to do that. And it's kind of messy, and if the weather's bad, I'm already making it messy enough in this building this way. So I have pre-drilled holes in all your logs, and we're going to put mushroom spawns in the holes. So you can kind of see in this cross section what it looks like with the plugs, with the holes in there. So we'll put the mushroom spawn in these holes, and then the mycelium of the mushrooms, kind of like its roots, will kind of spread all along where you can see the rings here and colonize your log. And then it will make mushrooms, which is like the fruiting body of the mushroom organism. Yes?
Is it about an inch?
It is. It will get more to that in just a minute. Great question. Where we're going. So just in terms of like thinking about how the mushrooms grow in here. We've put holes all around here. They're not in this example. And then you can see like the sapwood out here on the tree, which is like what carries the nutrients of the tree. So like all the nutrients that our mushrooms are going to feast on are like right in this part where we put the mushroom spawn. So it will kind of like feed on this and go around and colonize all this. And your log kind of has to get completely colonized by the mycelium before it will start making mushrooms. So if you have a skinnier log, you will see mushrooms earlier than if you have a fatter log. It will take that mushroom longer to get mushrooms, but it will last longer. So kind of rule of thumb is how many inches in diameter your log is, might be how many years of mushrooms you can get off of it. So if you have like a 3-inch big log, then you could expect that you might get mushrooms fruiting on it for 3 years. And then there might be some more after that, but the logs are going to decompose because mushrooms are feeding on it and eating up all the nutrients in it. And if you have a bigger log, it might take you longer to get your first flush of mushrooms, but then that mushroom log might last mushrooms for 4 years. And a lot of people will get their mushroom logs, and I think normally like 36 to 40 inches long. These are all 36 inches, I think. And like this is a pretty skinny one. I have some ones that are kind of too fat, but trees just aren't all one size. So we're kind of like going in a range of what we have here. So you could make them bigger or longer. These are all Belk's elder, they're really light. I have some oak right outside the door that has shiitake mushroom spawn in it, in case there's too many people and I didn't have enough logs. And those are way heavier. So, if you cut them longer, it's just a lot bigger for you to move around your property and stuff. So normally, like when people are growing them commercially, this is about the length that they're doing, so they can move them all around and stack them up. So, on doing the mushroom, putting the holes in the logs, I would recommend, you can do this with a regular drill bit, but if you are going to do more than a couple logs, I would recommend you go buy a mushroom specific drill bit. So Field and Forest sells them, they're probably in this catalog. And they have a little stopper on how deep it goes, so you know that it fits the mushroom spawn in there perfectly. And then it's just a drill bit that goes in your drill, and then you well, not if it's not all the way clamped down, but and then it'll be good. If you're just doing a few, you have a drill, that's great. You could get the drill bit. If you're going to do a lot of mushroom logs, I would recommend you get the mushroom specific drill bit, and I would recommend you use an angle grinder. And they sell an angle grinder adapter. I left it at home, so I can show you, but that goes so you can screw on the bit onto an angle grinder, and it just goes way, way, way faster. So if you're going to do a lot of logs, the angle grinder goes way faster. The other thing about drilling the holes, so there are 2 different types, well there's more, but for growing on the logs, there are really 2 main types of mushroom spawn to put in the logs. And one is called a plug spawn, which is what we're going to do tonight. And they are little wooden dowels that they have inoculated mushrooms on. And you might see in there's something about like grain spawn, and that is a lot of times that they're like growing them on wood chips or straw. And you'll see in the spawn, the plug spawn, when I get it out, there's like little wheat berries in there. So that's the grain spawn. And then they put these little wooden dowels in there with the grain spawn, and has inoculated these little pieces of wood, and we're going to hammer them into here. So if you know you want to use plug spawn, these drill bits have a specific size for plug spawn, okay? And then there's also sawdust spawn. And if you're going to use sawdust spawn, they sell a specific drill bit that's for sawdust spawn. So you probably can't see that, but that is a lot fatter. So whatever way you want to inoculate them, what type of spawn you're going to buy, I would buy the corresponding drill bit that fits it. Like I said, you can go to the hardware store and just look up what size the plug spawn and get that. But if you're like just ease and fast, these are not expensive, and if you're going to do more than a couple logs, I would buy them. The sawdust spawn looks just like a bag of sawdust that's kind of mushroomy. And to do the sawdust spawn, you do need to have another tool, and it is an inoculator like this. And it has an open hole right here, and you kind of just jab it in your sawdust, and it'll go up in here, and then you'll line this up with your holes, and go like that, and it will shoot the sawdust right in your hole. If you're going to do a lot of logs, The sawdust spawn is much cheaper. So you do need to buy this tool, but it maybe costs like $25 at the most. If you're gonna do a lot of them, I would get the sawdust spawn. All the ones we did for ourselves at home, we did a little bit of plug spawn as kind of like a practice for doing workshops, but we've mostly done at home all the sawdust spawn. Just for you all today, the plug spawn's a little bit easier. But do that here, and that's a much cheaper method of doing it, and it's a little bit faster. You'll kind of see after just doing your 2 logs, some people are like, I'm still hammering these pegs in, and still takes a while. But so 2 different methods, or 2 different types of spawn, 2 different sizes of drill bits, and I would just get the one that corresponds with what you're gonna do. So after we put our mushroom spawn in here, you'll have to seal it up with wax, and I'll do a little demonstration. But you all have these containers of plug wax on your tables, and that wax is only for the plug spawn. So that's another reason why we're doing plug spawn tonight, because you have to use hot wax to seal up the holes with the sawdust spawn, and which is fine. But in this huge group of us having all these pans of hot wax and everyone having to share it, it just seemed a little bit overwhelming. So this spreadable plug wax is only for the plug spawn, and there are lots of companies you can buy mushroom spawn from, but Field and Forest is the only one I've seen that sells this plug spawn. So everywhere else, if you want to do plug spawn, you can do hot wax on it, and that would be like the most common default thing.
Is that wax like a beeswax?
It is cheese wax, so it's like what's on the rind of a cheese. And I've had a question several times this month about if you can use beeswax, and I haven't looked it up. So I've never seen that ever recommended, but my guess is that it's just a harder thing to find than like if you're buying a mushroom spawn, every place sells cheese wax to do it with. So that's the only thing I've used for is cheese wax. And these little plug wax things are cheese wax with mineral oil to make it spreadable. So it's also cheese wax. But if you do want to do hot wax at home, we did all of ours with hot wax except for some test logs. We just have like the cheapest hot plate that you can buy at Walmart, and we'll put an extension cord out to where we're doing. I've also done many times on a camp stove, and I highly recommend not using a camp stove with an open flame and just taking an extension cord out to do a hot plate. And then, again, it's like the cheapest pot. You can tell it has wax in it from last time. And then we just keep it on there. And the cheese wax comes in like big blocks, just like, so it's solid, and then we'll just melt up in your pan. If you are doing the cheese wax, you need like a little paintbrush, or mushroom companies will sell these little daubers. And so if you melt up your cheese wax, and you put your mushroom spawn in, and then you just kind of dip and put it on. And we've done it many ways. If there's like a lot of people, we might have someone drilling the holes and someone doing the mushroom and someone doing the wax. Or when my husband and I are just doing it, we have this little setup right here, and we'll drill all the logs of holes, and then we'll come back and put it on here. And like one of us will go through, and on that side of the table, we'll put a mushroom spawn in, and then we'll rotate it, and then the other person can stand over here and wax the row. So another thing I don't have to plant to the table. If you are going to do a lot of logs, I would make a little roller setup like this, so that you can rotate the log when you're drilling it. It's been way faster and easier and nicer since we started doing that. And it's a very simple, cheap setup of just some casters we screwed into 2x4s that we clamp onto a table wherever we're going to do the mushrooms at. You all just have to roll them around on the tables today because I didn't make a bunch of sets of this. But that's another thing if you're going to do a bunch at home.
I looked up the cheese wax deal while she was talking. Cheese wax remains flexible in cold weather, so it doesn't crack or pop out. That's why they recommend it, but it said soy or beeswax would also work.
Thank you for looking that up. I always forget, and then another person asks it. I'm like, oh. Okay. I'm going to give you guys a cup of spawn, and so it's these little wooden dowels. And you'll just go through and put your dowel on the log and hammer it until it's flush. And then you'll probably want to do all your hammering and then come back and get some cheese wax on your finger. We have gloves up here. And just spread it
Put the hammer down.
with your finger over top of the hole. And it doesn't have to get really thick, just so the whole dowel is covered up and around the hole so that it keeps the moisture in. When you get your spawn shipped to you, you'll want to keep it like in the fridge, sealed up in the bag, because we're keeping the moisture in. So once we get them in the log, the wax is to keep the mushroom spawn moist, so it doesn't dry out before it gets inoculated. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy thick, but it just needs to be sealed up on there. And I will say, using the cheese wax, it does seem like more obvious, like you can really tell if it's sealed up. But this works well, and I found that when we did our test ones with this, like in February, at this point now that they set, they pretty much look the same as the cheese ones, but it looks different at this point. All right, does anybody have any questions about the choosing of the mushroom stuff and inoculating the
I don't
mushrooms?
know where we put these when we get home.
Okay, great question.
I was going to
I
say,
should have
where are we supposed to store these?
questions. I was like, I didn't talk about one key thing, and that is what you do when you go home. You need to put them in a shady spot. So you don't need to hike back in the woods and put them way back in there, because you'll never go look at them, or I wouldn't, and see if they're fruiting. But it does need to be a shady location. Some past,
Total shade.
it does not have to be. I would say as shady as you can get. If you don't have a total shade spot, you wouldn't have to do that. Like some of the ones that we did a few years ago, we just had like on the north side of a building under some trees, but it got some sun on it, but it was like a close enough place that we're like, we'll look at them. With all the ones that we inoculated this year, we kind of put up in a little holler that's on our property under some trees, but like on the edge of the woods. So some sun's gonna get on it. But I would just say the shadiest place you have that's like easily accessible that you're gonna go, look at it.
Should it be vertical?
What?
Should it be vertical since there's holes all over? Or
It could be vertical, it could be laid on the ground for now. When it's mushroom, when it's fruiting, you will wanna like kind of stick it up so it can mushroom sprout all around. Right now, it could be laying down, but don't put it directly on the ground, so.
Can you prop it up like on bricks? or
Exactly,
something? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah, so it could just be another limb, some
Or-
sticks, some rocks, something just so, yes, you could stick them up like this, just don't put the one end directly on the ground. Because we do want it to be moist, but we don't want it to start rotting more quickly because it's like really always in the damp ground. And we don't want any mushroom spores that are there to be like in direct contact with it that might outcompete all the mushrooms that we put in it.
But one of them in it was spraying, water.
You can, so when you go home, like I said before, you definitely should right now. And if we're going through a big droughty period, you definitely could. You wouldn't have to. If you're just gonna let it, it probably will be fine. If it's like, if you put them in a place where you can't get a water hose to it, but if you can, you might wanna water it in some dry spells. Yes.
So like we have an old tobacco barn on the property. In there is good, or does it have to be outside?
You want to put it outside because you do want it to get rained on. So
Okay.
if you could put it in your old tobacco barn as long as you're going in there and watering it a lot.
Depends on how much of your roof is missing on the car.
If there's no roof on it, if it's really like
We just-
old, then yeah. But otherwise, I wouldn't put it inside. I've had a lot of people ask if they could put it under their porch or in an old cellar, but you do want it to get rained on. Yes,
I have mulch underneath the tree.
yes.
Should I put it around that mulch or just up on bricks above it?
just maybe on bricks up above it, or another stick, another tree limb or something, and it doesn't have to be far off, just so it's maybe not directly right on your mulch, just because it will probably even wick up moisture from the ground right there if it's laying down. And we do want to be moist, I just don't want it to be like, we're decomposing this because it's laying right in the wet.
They might want the mushrooms to grow.
So I mentioned that you could look at, maybe look for your first flush in September after a rain. So then in future years too, the times that these would probably fruit is after a big rain in the spring or the fall. So that's when you're like, oh, it's raining a lot, we're getting into March, the temperatures are warming up a little bit, we had a big rain, I'm gonna go check my mushroom logs every day this week. And you're probably never gonna get mushrooms in the summer, even if you're watering it a lot. There are different strains of mushrooms, which are kind of talked about in the catalog, that might fruit at different times of year, but this strain is called Gray Dove. And it's a gray oyster mushroom, and it is mostly going to fruit in the spring or fall. And then, yeah, sometimes winter can even be a time where you might be worried that it's getting dry. Because sometimes we have really rainy winter, but sometimes, you know, it's like really cold and the humidity is really low and everything, but it'll probably be fine. You might just want to, you know, there's no leaves on the trees. If you put it under the shade, kind of check on it. But I think you probably, most of mine, I'm kind of lazy. I do them, then they go get set where they are, and I get oyster mushrooms when I get them. If you're growing shiitakes on logs, you can force fruit them. So that's another reason why shiitakes on logs are kind of a little bit more of a commercial thing you might have heard about. You can't do that with oysters. But if you did shiitakes on logs and you wanted them at a certain time, or you wanted shiitakes in the summer, you can take your logs and submerge them and soak them in like a tub of water. Or I've seen people that have a bunch next to a stream, and they'll like put them in the water and take them back out. And then I can't remember how many days it is, but maybe like 10 days later you think they would be fruiting. So you can force fruit shiitakes by simulating them getting a really big rain. But these oysters, you will just have to go with when it happens, it happens.
So do we have to worry about critters or creatures getting into our?
I have never had anything get into the ones using the plug spawn. This is a great question. But using the sawdust spawn, one time we inoculated all these logs, and then like almost immediately woodpeckers came and ate all the spawn out of the holes.
Oh, no.
I've never had that happen on the plug spawn, so I think you'll be fine with these. But if you do sawdust spawn, we now keep all of our logs under a shade cloth that I just have for like growing vegetables. You might put in a greenhouse, but you could use something else, just what we had, so that woodpeckers and birds can't like get on it and eat all your spawn out. That's never happened on the plugs, so you're probably fine.
Wildlife peeing on it is okay.
I don't, you know,
Like, my dog would probably
Yeah, I was saying,
freak it out. It'd be like, ooh, this is new, let me pee on it.
the mushrooms, you know, definitely sometimes we'll get some insect damage on them. So they might not always be the most beautiful mushrooms. But normally if you're like harvesting them when they're first coming out and not leaving them on there too long, I think they look pretty good. But it'd be kind of similar if you forage mushroom in the woods. There might be some insects that have got on there, and you want to wash your mushrooms in water before you eat them. And you do really want to go check and see if they're fruiting, because the younger the mushroom, I mean, you don't need to pick it when it's this big, it's going to be nicer. And once the cap of it, mushroom, you know, starts kind of flattening out like that, you've kind of waited too long. So you want the mushroom of the oysters kind of be domed down. They'll be the nicest, like most tender, best tasting mushroom. And normally it seems like if I've left them to get too long is when I start really seeing like insects are like not a little bit. But yeah, the woodpecker year. Then I went several years and we didn't make any more mushroom logs because I was like so disheartened. But now we've done a bunch more again, but they're all under a thing where birds can't get.
you said like a log this size maybe lasts 3 years. Do they self-seed or is that plug still inoculated for 3 years? What, how?
So it's like I
Does
was
that work?
saying, we put these plugs in here, it's a great question. And then it's gonna grow the myceliums, like the roots, and it's gonna go in the whole log. So you're not really gonna get any fruiting mushrooms until the roots have like grown in your whole log. So the plug, I guess, technically maybe is still inoculated for 3 years, but it's really like your whole log. The plugs are letting the mushrooms colonize your whole log.
So the faster this decomposes, the faster the end of life.
Correct, that's exactly right. Because we are causing decomposition. We are putting mushrooms on here to eat them, so. Yes, that's exactly right.
Could you put, when the log is, decomposed, could you put another log there added and hit, take that log?
I've never tried that. I think you probably could, but I wouldn't say you're gonna 100% get mushrooms. You know, I think like being like, I am doing the most control that there's gonna be mushrooms is doing this, doing new ones like this. But I'm sure, I mean, that's how it happens in nature, so I think you probably could do that. For sure. And then you probably have a better chance that it would be that mushroom because you put it right on there and not like, you know, if you're not putting, one of the reasons there's like so many holes on here and we're putting like so much mushroom spawn in here is to make sure like our mushrooms are out competing anything that's gonna happen in the wild once we go put these up. But I would be interested if you do that, then you've got oysters on it, because I feel like that's.
I've got on my calendar to send you all reminders in September. So if you may do something like I do and put your log out there and never think of it again. So you will get reminders this fall to start checking your logs.
Do I?
I don't know. I said that one didn't want to stay in.
Show us how to do the wax real quick.
Huh?
Show us how to do the wax real quick.
Yep, I got brand new wax. Good. Ah. Where's my other ones?
I don't know. Like this right there.
Oh, I turned it. She said you could tell